Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make chocolate chip cookies. Now, if you are in FACS class at Simmons, you can follow along on the recipe that's been provided for you. If you are following along at home, you can grab yourself a bag of a particular brand of chocolate chips and follow along on the recipe that's printed on the bag. But for our purposes in 6th grade FACS, we are going to be making half of the recipe from the bag. So following along on the recipe lab plan, this will be provided at the end of the video. Our first step in making our cookies is going to be taking a medium bowl, and into it we are going to combine 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour, and then a half a teaspoon each of both salt and baking soda. Just place them in the bowl, grab yourself a stirring device of your choice, and just give it a stir. Once you have combined those ingredients, simply set it aside and retrieve your large mixing bowl. Now into this bowl we are going to go with our first step of creaming the butter and sugar together. Now your recipe calls for a half of a cup of butter. What I have here today is a quarter of a cup of butter and a quarter of a cup of vegetable shortening. This is butter flavored. If I were to use all butter, it will change how the cookie bakes. Butter and shortening melt at different temperatures. So a cookie that is made completely with butter will spread, whereas a cookie made completely with shortening will be more puffy. By using both, we kind of split the difference. It will spread, but it will remain puffy at the same time. To the butter, I'm going to add 1/4 cup and 2 tablespoons of white granulated sugar, 1/4 cup and 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. Now remember, when we measure brown sugar, it needs to be packed very firmly, so firm that it holds the shape of either the cup or the spoon that we are measuring with. And I'm also going to add a half of a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now looking in this bowl, it's very easy to see that we have a multitude of different ingredients. We need to combine them together. To do that, we are going to use our electric mixer. This is a hand mixer. You can use an upright one if you're at home, but the hand mixer is what we have here in the classrooms. Before you plug it in, please ensure that the mixer is off, and we want to insert the beaters. Now when the beaters go into the mixer, we need to make sure that they click into place. If they're not locked, when you turn the mixer on, they will go flying. So we're going to check that they're locked. Double check again that it is off before you plug it into the nearest outlet. If this is on, the beaters will start spinning, and if your hands are in the wrong place, well, you get the idea. So our goal in mixing this ingredients together is to have everything look exactly the same. You don't want to be able to look in the bowl and say, oh, there's white sugar and brown sugar and butter. It should all look identical. So we're going to put the mixer in, start on a low speed. Might want to just kind of give your brown sugar a bit of a crunch there. Start on a low speed and mix. Once your ingredients have taken on a uniform shape, do take a rubber scraper and scrape all the ingredients back into the center of the bowl. Now I can see that my brown sugar did get a little bit on the firm side, so I do have some lumps of brown sugar. So I'm just going to take my spoon and just kind of, or my spatula, rubber scraper here, and just kind of smash them out, and they'll continue to break down as I mix in the remaining ingredients. Once you have put it all back in the center of the bowl, our next step is going to be to add 1 egg. Now there are some tricks to getting the egg into the mixing bowl. We don't want to take the egg and simply crack it into here, because if the egg is spoiled or we drop eggshell, it's going to be very difficult to get out of our mixing bowl. But if we take our egg and we crack it into another container, say a custard cup, it'll be easier to fish out eggshells, and we'll be able to check the egg to make sure that it's okay. Tap the egg lightly on the countertop, just enough to get a crack in the shell, and then just split it open over the custard cup. Egg shouldn't smell like anything, so you shouldn't smell anything, and just kind of give it a check. Make sure there's no shell inside the egg. Make sure it looks okay. This one is fine. So we're going to return to our mixing bowl, add in the egg, and then mix again. This is going to add a lot of moisture to our cookie dough. Eggs also work kind of like kitchen glue. It's going to hold all of the ingredients together so that when we go to scoop this out later, it doesn't crumble apart. So mix, mix, mix. Okay, you can see that the dough consistency has changed a little bit. It's a bit creamier, and that just has to do with the moisture from the egg. So, get it all back down into the center, and now we need to contemplate adding the flour to this mixture. If we take our bowl of flour just as it is and just dump it all in there, we're going to have some problems. The first of which, all that flour is just going to go flying up into the air. The second problem we're going to have is it's going to be very hard on our mixer here. Our little handheld mixer is not strong enough to deal with all of the flour at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to guesstimate 1/3 of our mixture of flour into our bowl. So just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be precise. But what we want to do is mix the flour into the butter sugar mixture in portions. We don't want to do it all at once. So, if you start this on a super, super high speed, you will throw flour everywhere. So start low, and you can always turn up the speed as you go. Okay, hand on the bowl, here we go. Do take, every time you stop mixing, your rubber scraper and scrape down the sides of the bowl. As you can see that some of the flour gets kind of flung up onto the sides. And just to make sure that we get it all into the dough where we want it to be, we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl frequently. Alright, now we're going to take half of the flour that remains and add it to the mixture. So you still have some left in your bowl. And again, start low. You can always turn up the speed. Now you're going to notice as we continue to add flour to the mixture that it really starts to come together and look like a dough. If you were to bake it at this point, however, there is not enough flour in here to support the structure of what is going to eventually be our cookie. So what we'll end up with is this kind of gooey puddle, which is not tasty. So do make sure that you add in that last section of flour. Now as we mix this one in, you're going to start to hear the mixer struggling a little bit, and that just has to do with the fact that the mixer is not super, super powerful. So, in we go. All right. With the last installment of flour in place, we are going to ditch the mixer. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to unplug it. The next thing you're going to do is you are going to eject the beaters. So somewhere on your mixer, we have a button that says eject. So in our case here at school, it is actually the switch. So we're going to push the button in to release the beaters from the mixer. Now I know you're super, super tempted to take these beaters and lick them. We're at school, we can't do that. So what I want you to do is simply take your spatula, a little one, and you are going to scrape all of the dough off of the beaters. Here at school, we need to make sure that we are following proper food safety rules. This does contain a raw egg, which does have the potential for salmonella. But more than that, even flour can be an issue sometimes. And it's just a sanitation thing. We don't want to be sticking our fingers or our tongue into something we're preparing for somebody else. So Do a very good job. Scrape these beaters off really well. Make sure you don't leave any cookie dough on them, and that will just make it a lot easier for the person washing the dishes to take care of that. Once you have all the dough off the beaters, scrape it again. Okay, now you could bake this and you would have cookies. Very plain cookies, but they would be cookies. The flour in here is enough to hold the structure. Obviously, it would taste much better with the addition of something. And that something today is 1 cup of baking chips. Now, in my measuring cup, I have a total of 1 cup of both peppermint chips and white chips. Do not use the mixer to mix these in. Do not use your rubber scraper. Take a mixing spoon, because it's going to require a little bit more force. And by hand, mix in your chips. And if things go flying, throw them back in. Like, don't waste those precious, precious chips. They're tasty. Now, your groups in class, you'll have some options for your chips, and I will give those options to you once this video has concluded. Now, for class purposes, this is all that we will accomplish on the first day of our cookie preparation. We will refrigerate this, so you would take saran wrap, cover the bowl, make sure there's no dough around the edges because the saran wrap won't stick. Label the bowl with your kitchen color and store it in the refrigerator overnight. When you are ready to bake your cookies, preheat your oven to 375 degrees. I'd like to line my pans with parchment. This is a silicone infused piece of paper, which means that your food will not stick, which is awesome because it helps the bottom of the cookies not get too overdone. For FACS class, we are going to use the food disher. Here's how it works. We simply scoop into the dough, have your scoop over full, and then press it up against the side of the bowl a couple times. Kind of like you were packing in the brown sugar, only now we're packing in the cookie dough. Onto your pan, and then just pull the trigger a couple times, and out pops a beautiful little wonderful shaped cookie ball. The benefit of using the food disher to dish up your cookies is that every single cookie on your pan will be exactly the same size, which is wonderful because that means they'll all bake in the same amount of time. Now, how many cookies you put on your pan is strictly dictated by how big your pan is. In the FACS room at Simmons, we have 2 different size cookie sheets. One will hold 12 cookies and one will hold 16. So obviously the bigger one would be the 16. I chose to use the one for the 12, which means I will get a dozen cookies onto my pan. There is no such thing as extra cookie dough, so you will keep scooping cookies until you run out of dough. We are going to bake 1 pan at a time in a 375 degree oven. Now the time it takes to bake, again, is determined by a number of factors. How cold is the cookie dough? How warm is your kitchen? So we're going to go with the range of time that's provided, which is 8 to 10 minutes. So that means if you set your oven for 8 minutes and the cookies aren't done, you can always add more time. If you set the oven for 10 minutes and your cookies were done at 8, you're kind of out of luck. So it's always a good rule of thumb to go with the low time and then adjust accordingly. When it comes time to put your cookies into the oven, there are a couple things that we need to be aware of. The first of which is that we are only going to bake 1 pan at a time, and we're going to use the top rack inside of your oven. Now, if you think back to when we made the pizza, we put tin foil on the pan, which we could wrap around the edge. Well, parchment is incredibly slippery, so if you tip the pan even slightly, your cookies are going to go away, and since the parchment will go off, it might fall into the bottom of the oven, it could fall into the floor. Neither of those are very good options. So keep the pan level. When you're moving the pan, make sure that you have a grip on both the pan and the parchment. Now when going into the oven, you do not have to use a pot holder or oven mitt, but you certainly could. So pan and parchment, open the oven door all the way and slide your pan in. Now depending on whether it's the big or the little pan, you may have to rotate it, spin it around to accommodate. We're going to start with 8 minutes, so set the timer on your microwave. hit kitchen timer, 800, start. If the microwave is humming, stop, because that means you're running the microwave, not just the timer. In 8 minutes, we will check this. Do not open this oven until the 8 minutes have passed. Every time we open the oven, we let some hot air out, which means your cookies take longer to bake. Instead, turn on the oven light. Now the timer has gone off, and I did check my cookies. Now I did leave them in for an additional minute because I was not happy with their doneness, but they are ready now. So we're going to open the oven door all the way down, keeping our pan as level as possible. We are going to get a hold of the lip of the pan with the pot holder, not your fingers please. Pull the pan out level and set it on top of the stove. Now you would put your second pan into the oven, close it, and then set the timer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the hardest part. These have to sit for 2 minutes. What we are going to do is take advantage of the slipperiness of the parchment, holding the pan with your pot holder. We are simply going to slide them off, keeping your very hot pan on the stove, and allowing these cookies to sit for 2 minutes. When your 2 minutes have passed, we are going to transfer the cookies to our cooling rack, which you have conveniently placed on the countertop next to your stove. The purpose of the 2 minute wait is not just to torture you. It allows the bottom of the cookie to finish setting. If you were to pick the cookies up and move them right away, since the bottom isn't fully set, they would actually start to sink through the cooling rack, and that's not fun. So allow them to cool for those 2 minutes, transfer them to your cooling rack. Now, you could allow these to cool fully before consuming. You should definitely allow these to cool fully before storing them, because if steam comes up, it'll condense on the roof of your container and drip back onto your cookies. For class purposes, after your cookies have been transferred over, you can eat them.